Is this still, now as we take it towards NVIDIA, I mean, is it just still NVIDIA's world and everybody else is just living in it? And is that the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future?
You know, I think that, when Broadcom reported and Hock Tan, outlined the vision for custom silicon, that was a change statement in the market, appreciating how the world is led by and dominated by NVIDIA, but that there's also a rising tide here for custom silicon that will help the likes of Broadcom and Marvell as they support, in Broadcom's case, Google, Meta, TikTok, and in Marvell's case, Amazon and Microsoft. So, there's definitely different spots for the different kind of areas of silicon, but, at a very high level, as you think about NVIDIA going into their best product cycle in the history of the company with Blackwell, it's hard to not, think of them as the top outperformer for all of semis in 2025.
But how do we know how long the cycle is and how many quarters we could see growth like this? How does it compare to other previous semiconductor cycles?
Well, this cycle is unlike any other. I think most investors look back to the advent of the internet and how long kind of the internet infrastructure investment cycle played out. But this one's very different, right? Where the companies that are making the investments, predominantly the hyperscalers, they're generating meaningful free cash flow despite, spending hundreds of billions of dollars building out AI. And let's be clear, this is existential for these companies as they all try to get to AGI. And so I think this is a multi-year investment cycle. And, just on Friday, OpenAI released O3. And this model is incredibly important in the sense of the improvements that they're making, the reasoning that they're using. So it's post-training reasoning, where the more compute you apply to the large language model, the better the outcome. And really the big takeaway is that it's driving even incrementally more compute requirements to get to AGI. So the short answer, I think investors are going to be surprised by the magnitude and duration of the investment in AI. And I absolutely believe that, if there is a pause for NVIDIA, the first we would see it would be 2027. And if I'm right with that assumption, then there's clear line of sight for growth for the top AI accelerator companies. So NVIDIA, Broadcom, Marvell, I would say the key arms dealers underneath that, whether it's TSMC or ARM or, semi-equipment players or test companies like Advantest and Teradyne. So I think this AI investment cycle really has legs.
On the list from Torsten is one of the risks to the rally, again, that NVIDIA earnings disappoint inflated expectations. He says there's a 90% chance that happens, that expectations have gotten so grand that they're bound to disappoint, and that's an overall market risk. I mean, the stock has not traded well at all in the last couple of months.
So, I mean, what if I tell you that at 31 times forward earnings, perhaps NVIDIA has already priced that in? By the way, what did he say, a 90% chance?
Yeah. NVIDIA's priced in a disappointment. The stock's up 178% year to date.
I got it. And as you just mentioned, it's off. And as I just also mentioned, it's 31 times forward earnings. He might be right, but the trajectory here matters a lot. Do we really think that the next quarter, the quarter we're in right now, NVIDIA is going to disappoint with everything we're hearing about demand for the chips? I don't. However, if he's saying by the end of the year there might be disappointment, that's a long time. And perhaps I think the 90% is too high. But I'll say this, just to make sure I'm super clear, I don't think this quarter or the next quarter we're looking at a rational reason for a disappointment in NVIDIA earnings.
I think the biggest risk in 2025 is earnings growth. If you look at the annualized earnings growth rate of the S&P the last 10 years, it's 8%. What's consensus for 2025?
Was it like 15?
14.8% this morning is where we are. That's a high ceiling that you have to kind of achieve. So I think that's the biggest risk is earnings.
With the Mag 7 decelerating from 55 to 20.
Some of the Mag 7 decelerating.
If you look at them as a unit, that's the number.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, Dom, NVIDIA's competitive landscape, you could say, is certainly evolving real time. Broadcom aggressively working to sign up new Silicon Valley tech giants as customers like OpenAI and Apple are looking to develop their own customized chips. However, when it pertains to AMD, which has sort of been seen as a main competitor to NVIDIA, Morgan Stanley analysts are sitting out on this one. They're not a believer. And it coincides with new research out today from industry heavyweight semi-analysis that looks at how AMD software compares to NVIDIA, and they found that NVIDIA scored well above AMD. Some of the wild cards Bank of America is watching into 2025, sentiment around AI, China's recovery, and the prospect of tariffs. Now, President-elect Trump has already threatened to put tariffs on Taiwan Semiconductor, the main manufacturer of cutting-edge chips, and experts say Taiwan could potentially be a bargaining chip in U.S.-China trade negotiations.
Good afternoon, and let's start with you on NVIDIA. I tell you, it's amazing both that it's up so much this year and that all the gains happened in the first half of the year.
Yeah, it is amazing. And even more amazing that despite how much has been up, not just this past year, but over the last 10 years, it is still expected to go up next year. And if you look at what they're rolling out, you know, they're over 50 times PE actually could be easily justified if you look at the Blackwell chip and the potential that that has. It is twice as expensive as the Hopper, but depending on who you ask, it's anywhere from 15 to 30 times faster for AI interference testing. And that's a big deal. Microsoft has already signed up to be the largest buyer along with all of the other cloud players.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to have plenty of demand for it. I guess, Tim, the question is, you know, has the market priced it? You see things like Broadcom ripping as almost like the next wave of this trade.
But I think, first of all, I think NVIDIA, the GB300 server chip March event, it will be a catalyst. It will be very important to the stock. I think for investors, I think this may be the year of AMD again coming up. In other words, I think it, down 20% on the year, not a reason to buy a stock. But I think it is on a relative basis to itself, trading roughly 30 times forward. This is a stock that actually within the space and what you're getting for the distant second player, I like AMD here.
Yeah, and semis, of course, as a group have struggled. Really They've kind of lost their leadership profile. See if that changes after the first of the year.
And if I could remind everybody watching right now, NVIDIA is going to become the hub of the AI ecosystem. They have very aggressive delivery schedules ahead with the Ultra version next year at Blackwell, and of course, Rubin and the Ultra version of Rubin coming in 2027 after that, plus their continued growth in data centers. I wouldn't bet against NVIDIA.
Well, and of course, they're comprising such a big part of the overall market as well. Charlie, I want to turn to you. Given kind of what we've seen with NVIDIA, what we've seen with chips this year, which there's no way to really describe the market action in 2024 without them, would you be rebalancing your portfolio now in anticipation of 2025? And if so, how?
Yeah, if I owned a lot of chip stocks in NVIDIA, I would absolutely be rebalancing. I mean, at this point, it is very dangerous to own stocks where they are so popular. I teach classes at a couple of 8th grades, and the one thing that these 8th graders all want to do is own chip stocks in NVIDIA. They tend to want to own what's worked in the past and don't care a lot about valuation. I'm not saying at this point I would sell it all, but clearly there's a very high expectations in these names. We're contrarian investors. We try to buy what hasn't gone up, and clearly semiconductors are not that.
NVIDIA, we've talked about it 100 times here now. We've got it right, we've got it wrong. I'll say this. Price to earnings, compelling. Price to sales, no way. And those margins that they're enjoying right now, they're not going to enjoy in perpetuity. So I think the SMH trade is on the precipice right here.
Yeah, what's also really clear, and you just said this, Dom, that some of those other end markets for semis right now, whether it's industrial, whether it's auto, we heard from Micron last week that, consumer electronics, whether it be smartphones, whether it be PCs, are not particularly strong. And so when you think about the exposure that some of those have to China, and then you put together a weak end market or a bunch of weak end markets, I mean, the last trade, the last, leg standing is really generative AI. It's spending probably, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, they make up 40% of NVIDIA's revenues. Like at some point, you're going to need to see the semi trade broaden out. Carter just spoke to it. The equal weight S&P is not doing a whole heck of a lot. So again, and I started the show by saying this, I think a lot of investors would love to see some of that froth come out of some of the leadership, and then they're probably going to pile right back into the leadership until there's some reason for them to see some sort of decelerating growth or orders in the
And muscle memory, Steve, is there for chip stocks.
Yeah, and they've been, to Dan's point, they've been the safety bet, right? So they have large cash on the balance sheet. But if you look at NVIDIA and Broadcom, the way we were set it up, people are going with Broadcom because they don't see a competitor. If Dan is NVIDIA and I go to him to supply all my chips, he could compete with me. Broadcom doesn't have that ability to compete the way NVIDIA does. So a lot of these companies, we know the top names. It's the 5 mega cap names that are the biggest consumer of the chip space. If I'm a Microsoft, do I want to go with a potential competitor to get my chips from?
Yeah, but one of the things about Broadcom, and I think, and Gene Munster and I had this conversation, I know he's on Fast Money. I mean, one of his big themes, Deepwater Asset Management, for 2025 is custom silicon. It's basically who's going to partner with a Broadcom to create their own high-end GPU, which actually does, kind of give them a second source rather than, I think a lot of these folks are really sick of NVIDIA and the stranglehold that they have on pricing right now. So again, that was a big reason why Broadcom moved that way. We've seen story after story after story, whether it's Micron, whether it's Meta, these guys all want to create, Google, they all want to create their own chips, and they're going to partner with folks like Broadcom.
But I think that's the most important part that you just said, that they become, and I'm just using the analogy, they become China, right? So people want to start and diversify their supply chain. So if NVIDIA holds 85% of the AI supply chain, you've got to diversify around it. There's a handful of reasons why, but the investment for corporations, corporate tax isn't going up. That was one of the unknowns going into the election. So you have the ability to have a little bit of runway to say, do I want to invest more in my company?
All right.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. I'm going to keep the commentary short on this one. NVIDIA had a nice day today, finishing up nearly 3.7%. Looking ahead, we have Jensen Huang scheduled to speak at CES on the evening of January 6, 2025, NVIDIA earnings on February 26th, and then NVIDIA's GTC conference in March. All of these events could potentially be market-moving both for NVIDIA stock as well as for mega-cap tech and the broader market. I still think the long-term thesis surrounding NVIDIA and the build-out of AI infrastructure remains intact. As long as everything remains peaceful in the Pacific, and as long as none of the hyperscalers significantly reduce their capex on AI, then I think NVIDIA should be just fine for at least the next 1 to 2 years. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.